We're able to live because of the hard work of our farmers. I insist to my soon-to-be father-in-law, but my words fall on deaf ears. He mocks farming as a job that's not profitable. He even laughs, challenging me to show him the life of a farmer. Fine, let him see my family farm. He'll regret his words soon enough. My name is Henry. I used to work in sales, but when my dad's health deteriorated, I took over the family farm. I'm the second son, but my elder brother moved overseas for work. That left me as the only one to continue the family business. I have a sweet and strong-willed fiancé. I fell head over heels for Ellie the moment I saw her working at our regular cafe, and that's how our relationship started. 2 years into dating, she accepted my marriage proposal. So here I am, about to meet Ellie's parents. Gosh, I'm nervous, I mutter, looking up at the luxurious high-rise where Ellie's parents live. Don't worry, Henry. I've already talked to my mom about you. But my dad, well, that's another story. I've heard her father is a stern man who owns a few restaurants. As nervous as I was, I go in and greet them. To my relief, both warmly welcome me. Sorry that we haven't been able to sync our schedules because of my busy work, the father-in-law began, then started elaborating on how well his company was doing. Henry, I hear you're the top performer in sales. You must be making good money, right? Do you have plans on where you want to live in the future? How about moving into this high-rise condo? All I could do was force a smile at the rapid-fire questions. You're being rude to Henry, said the mother-in-law as she served the tea. Thank you. This tea is quite good. The delicious flavor helped ease my tension. Oh, I'm glad you like it. My brother grows the tea leaves. Our family home has a tea plantation, and they always send us the fresh tea. The conversation took a lively turn as my mother-in-law and I chatted about the tea. My father-in-law then huffed and said, "A tea plantation, how antiquated. Few households drink tea these days. I wonder when your family home will go out of business." His disparaging remark about her family home left my mother-in-law looking downcast. I had heard somewhere that tea plantations aren't as profitable as they used to be. It's labor-intensive work that requires skill and, above all, manpower. Still, seeing my mother-in-law so disheartened, I couldn't keep my mouth shut. We owe our livelihood to the farmers who work hard to produce our food. We're able to live thanks to the people who grow crops. The same is true for tea. I'm sure many people find comfort in the delicious taste of this tea. At my words, my father-in-law scowled. I seemed to have put him in a bad mood. The timing couldn't have been worse, but I took a deep breath and blurted out, I've decided to quit my job and take over the family farm. I've decided to protect the land that's been passed down through the generations. Ellie has accepted this, so please, support us in the future. The moment I announced that I had taken over the farm, my father-in-law's face turned red with anger. A farmer? I agreed to meet you because you were the top-performing sales guy. Ellie, did you lie to me? My father-in-law, his face filled with anger, turned to Ellie. I've tried to talk to you about this many times, but you were too busy. Besides, Mom supports our decision, Ellie said, sighing. She must have known it would come to this. Upon hearing that I had switched from my job to farming, my father-in-law's attitude changed dramatically. It was a parade of prejudice against farmers. How dare a poor person living in an old house talk about getting married? It's embarrassing to tell people that my daughter's husband is a farmer and so on. When asked what I was growing, I answered mainly cherry tomatoes, and he exclaimed, Cherry tomatoes? They don't seem to make much money and there's no future in them. Of course, we're growing more than just tomatoes. I tried to explain, but my father-in-law cut me off and started laughing. Growing a variety of vegetables is proof that you're not making a profit. He dismissed whatever I said. My father-in-law started a restaurant business at a young age and was successful, so he's particular about profits. Although I've just taken over the farm, I've certainly been considering profits. But as I tried to discuss this, my father-in-law shook his head dismissively. He didn't expect much from me. I'd like to see what life as a farmer is like. Is your house a shack? Are your parents wearing overalls and straw hats while working? Maybe I should meet them next time. I was getting angry at him making fun of my house and parents, but the one who protested angrily was Ellie. I can't believe you're making fun of farmers. I'm ashamed to be your daughter. At Ellie's words, my father-in-law was enraged and slapped her on the cheek. My mother-in-law was angry that he had raised his hand against her daughter. Ellie, with tears from the pain, turned the situation into complete chaos. You're living in this high-rise condo thanks to me. Be grateful. I don't care who a daughter like you marries. I took Ellie, who was sobbing, and left my in-laws' house. I couldn't forgive my father-in-law for making fun of farming and for hitting Ellie. Hello, it's Henry. I'll be bringing my fiancée and her parents next time. I called my father and reported every word of my father-in-law's remarks. He runs restaurants, doesn't he? What's the name of it? He asked, so I told him my father-in-law's name and the name of the restaurants he runs. I have an idea, so wait for me. I asked what he meant by an idea, but he said he was still uncertain and hung up the phone. After a while, my father called back. After hearing from my father, I immediately went to meet some people. Later, Ellie and I went to greet my mother-in-law again. She apologized for my father-in-law's arrogant attitude. He had apparently become arrogant since his restaurant business took off. He moved into a high-rise condo to show off to people around him and began to look down on those who earned less than him. It was a daily occurrence for him to ridicule her family's tea farm. His affairs with women were not hidden, and he did as he pleased, according to my mother-in-law. She said she endured it all for her daughter. I don't want to cause trouble for Ellie and Henry by getting a divorce. My mother-in-law is a kind person who thinks of Ellie and me. Don't worry about us. Please think of your own happiness. When I said that, she thanked me and smiled. I want to help my brother who inherited our family's tea farm. I don't want to see the farm that has been handed down for generations go out of business. You reminded me of the importance of tea farm, Henry. So I'm going to divorce him and go back to my parents' home. It seemed that my mother-in-law's resolution was already made. The day came when I took my in-laws to my parents' home. After getting off the airplane, we drove for another hour. There were vast fields and farms around us. I can't believe there are houses where people live in such a rural area. My father-in-law spat out in the car. Ellie and my mother-in-law obviously looked uncomfortable, but patient, probably because he could say he wanted to go home if a quarrel started here. I'm looking forward to see the life of a farmer. Is the toilet outside or something? My father-in-law ridiculed my home, laughing uproariously. You'll see when we get there. After driving a while, we saw a large gate and high walls. I'm back. I brought everyone with me. When I spoke to the intercom, the gate opened automatically. What a grand gate! Oh, and the garden is so beautiful! Ellie followed me, cheerfully praising the scenery. We leave the garden to a gardener, but It's an English garden, so it's called. Because of my parents who love Europe, there were many of my mother's favorite roses planted. My mother-in-law entered the garden and happily sniffed the scent of the roses. My father-in-law grumbled that it was a bad taste garden. Please, this way. There's a large building beyond the large garden. That is my family home. The brick-built house has 12 rooms and living, dining, kitchen. It's quite spacious. In front of the entrance, there are 2 luxury cars and 3 off-road motorcycles parked. All the land around our house is our own farmland. My in-laws and Ellie were all agape. My parents greeted us at the entrance. Looking at my father-in-law, they showed a smile. Of course, they are not wearing overalls. When I entered the living room, there were relatives and some people gathered. Not only my parents, but everyone was dressed in suits. My father-in-law, insisting that formal attire is unnecessary when meeting farmers, had come in his usual attire of a t-shirt and jeans. Because my mother-in-law, Ellie, and I were dressed relatively formally, he stood out significantly. Hello. Perhaps feeling out of place? My father-in-law said in a small voice, looking down in embarrassment. My father introduced them to the relatives. This is Ellie, Henry's fiancée, and these are Ellie's parents. It seems like Ellie's father has quite a prejudice against farmers. Were you surprised to see that our home was not a shabby hut? The gaze the relatives cast upon my father-in-law was cold. It seemed that my father-in-law had told everyone the story I had told him. No, I mean, that's not... As my father-in-law stammered, several men stepped forward. Why are you guys here? My father-in-law looked surprised with widened eyes. We are disappointed in you, one of the men said, looking at my father-in-law. These men were organic farmers who were actually supplying vegetables to the restaurants my father-in-law runs. Hearing the name of the store, my father made connections and contacted these farmers. My father, who has been a farmer for many years, has many acquaintances. I had directly met them and conveyed my father-in-law's remarks. Apparently, my father-in-law had always been arrogant, and there were many complaints. Those who were outraged that he looked down on farmers so much had come today to directly voice their complaints. We would like to terminate our business relationship at the end of the next contract. Everyone nodded when one of the farmers said this. Wait a minute. Our specialty is organic vegetables. My father-in-law runs several Italian restaurants featuring vegetables popular among the women. Despite this, I thought it was unbelievable to make fun of the farmers who produce the vegetables. I guess for him, anything is fine as long as it makes a profit. He had set his sights on organic vegetables because he thought dumb women should bite if he touted them as healthy food. While my father-in-law was flustered at being told they wanted to stop trading, he is a businessman. He seemed to think that the farmers would also be in trouble if the contract ends. Are you sure about this? You're gonna lose your income, you know. Perhaps he regained his composure and began to threaten, acting high and mighty. Don't worry about that, I interjected, anticipating that my father-in-law would say something like this. The farmers had said they wanted to quit dealing with my father-in-law's company, but they would be in trouble if their source of income decreased. Through my sales job, I had made connections with so many people in various industries. Among them were many restaurant owners and food manufacturers. Even if they extended the deal with my father-in-law, I had introduced them to the next place they could do business, so they wouldn't be in trouble. When I told this fact, my father-in-law visibly started trembling. What am I supposed to do if I can't get vegetables." To my father-in-law, who held his head in his hands, my father said this: "Why not ask Henry? We also grow organic vegetables." Despite the ridicule from my father-in-law, we had started focusing on organic farming in our fields, including cherry tomatoes. As a result of repeated improvement in the variety, we were able to harvest quite sweet vegetables. We even had several invitations from companies wanting to contract with us. My father-in-law quickly turned to me, but I just smiled and said, "Of course, we refuse to do business." He slumped his shoulders and fell silent. Next to the quietened father-in-law, my mother-in-law and our parents were having a lively conversation. "When I bring the fresh tea from my hometown next time," my mother-in-law declared, as my parents were thrilled. In the car on the way back, my father-in-law exploded in anger. "How dare you cancel the deal? Do you want my business to go bankrupt?" He was shouting from the back seat. Frankly, I couldn't care less about what happens to his restaurants. "And you, as my wife, not even defending me. This is why I hate country women." Perhaps because I was completely ignoring him, his anger turned towards my mother-in-law. "Sure, you prefer city women, right? Your current favorite is Mary, isn't it?" When my mother-in-law calmly started talking, the car fell silent. "Henry paid to hire a detective. You didn't hide it at all, so the evidence was easy to obtain. Please take care of the divorce documents and the alimony payments." My father-in-law turned pale at her words. "Divorce? What are you saying? How do you plan to survive without my earnings?" She told him she planned to work on the tea farm her brother inherited after the divorce. Then my father-in-law smirked and said, "Isn't that tea farm on the verge of bankruptcy? Fine, I'll divorce you. It's better to live with a young woman than an aging wife." Then, no one spoke a word, and a heavy silence filled the car. When we arrived at the airport, not wanting to be together any longer, my father-in-law headed towards the gate alone. Ellie, looking at her father's back, muttered sadly, "To think such a man as my father." "I think your father will definitely regret his choice," I said, pulling Ellie's shoulder towards me. A few days later, my in-laws' divorce was finalized. Due to the evidence of his affair, he was fully liable. He seemed to have nearly forced my mother-in-law, saying, "I'll give you money, just leave." Ellie and I were angry when we heard the story, but my mother-in-law was laughing, saying it was okay since she got a lot of money. $50,000 in alimony from my father-in-law, and $15,000 in alimony from his mistress. She plans to use this money to revive the tea farm. While my father-in-law was enjoying himself at his high-rise condo with his mistress, her husband barged in, turning the place into a battlefield. Yes, my father-in-law's mistress was a married woman. We had known that when we had the detective investigate, so we thought it wouldn't end well. My father-in-law, who was also being sued for alimony by his mistress's husband, must have learned his lesson about women. Even after that, it seems like he's still living alone in his high-rise condo. His bad reputation spread among the farmers, and the number of farms willing to do business with him drastically decreased. That led him to close his branches, which were centered around organic vegetables. Perhaps feeling lonely, I heard that letters from my father-in-law occasionally arrive at my mother-in-law's parents' house. The content is pathetic, asking her to come back because he's lonely. At first, my mother-in-law was reading the letters, but Now she says she just throws them away without opening them. Once he called, she cut him off, saying, "If you're lonely, why don't you move out of the high rise?" We laughed when we heard that from her. We don't know whether he couldn't stand living alone in a large room or whether his business went under and he couldn't afford to live in the high rise anymore. But we heard that he moved to a small apartment. I've been extremely busy since I took over the farm, but having Ellie with me is a big support. She probably never thought she'd become a farmer's wife when we were dating. Yet, she came with me without a word of complaint, so I have nothing but gratitude for her. I think I like farming. It must be my mom's blood. Ellie, laughing, is adorable. A year later, we had our wedding. It was a grand ceremony, but my father-in-law was not there. He must be sad that he couldn't attend his only daughter's wedding. From my mother-in-law, we received freshly packed new tea, saying she wanted us to serve it to the guests. Thanks to my mother-in-law's help, the tea farm, which was on the verge of bankruptcy, seemed likely to turn a significant profit. Their tea is still fragrant and delicious, as always.
Would you mind not coming to our wedding or our new home? You'll just ruin the mood. If you don't like it, we can just divorce. Susie said this with a condescending look. Kellen seemed flustered by Susie's attitude. It's just too much to treat your in-laws like that. She could at least be a bit more polite. What did we ever do to Susie? All we did was greet her with, "We hope to get along from now on." What was so wrong with that? Susie clearly has a lot of growing up to do. She needs to be set straight. My name is Clara, a 55-year-old housewife. I work and also manage the household. My husband and I have a son named Kellen. He's grown up to be a fine young man and now works at a top-tier company. After years of raising our child, I was enjoying a relaxed life with Lucien, who had retired a bit earlier than me. We sometimes reminisced about our younger days and felt the emptiness without Kellen, but it was a refreshing change. We were thoroughly enjoying our current life and were confident about the future. Then, some wonderful news came our way. Kellen had found someone he wanted to marry. She was a junior at his company and they had been dating for a few years. Our beloved son, whom we had raised with so much care, had found happiness. How could we not be overjoyed? He had already proposed and it seemed Susie had happily accepted. They wanted to formally introduce her to us. We were excited to meet the woman Kellen had chosen and even rearranged our plans and picked out nice outfits for the occasion. Surely if Kellen chose her, she must be a wonderful person. She's probably sweet and very feminine. I was so excited to meet her that even my colleagues noticed, saying, "You seem to be in high spirits lately." Finally, the day of the introduction arrived. We waited in a private room at the designated restaurant when Kellen and a young, lovely woman walked in. She must be the woman he wants to marry. We began introducing ourselves. "Nice to meet you. I'm Susie. I have been dating Kellen." We introduced ourselves in return, nodding politely. The conversation flowed, discussing Kellen and Susie's past. Eventually, the topic shifted to work. "I would like to become a homemaker after we marry. I believe women should support their homes." "Oh, if you ever want to work, you should. I work too." "You work even though you're a mother-in-law?" Susie looked surprised and then displeased. Did I say something wrong? I think the idea that women should only be homemakers is outdated. Women can pursue careers now. Susie's face darkened even more. Kellen and Lucien both sensed the tension. What should I do? Was it wrong to express my opinion? I hesitated, and then Susie blurted out, "You must be so pitiful." "What?" I tilted my head, not understanding. Pitiful? Why would she say that? "Isn't it happier to be a homemaker, not having to work and just staying at home? It's easier than earning money. You probably weren't allowed to, right? So sad." That's not true. I'm very happy. My job is fulfilling. Lucien has already retired, so I don't have to worry about household chores. Wait, you work, but your husband doesn't? Aren't men supposed to earn money? It must be tough having a lazy husband. Don't say that. We chose this life together. No matter how much we tried to explain, Susie's pitying attitude didn't change, even though it's different. We chose this life because it's what we wanted. Why do we have to be criticized like that? As I was feeling frustrated, Susie hurled even more hurtful words at us.
Susie, enough is enough. Stop disrespecting my parents.
Kellen intervened, clearly unable to stand the tension any longer. But Susie wasn't convinced. Why won't you understand me? I just said that because I felt sorry for your mom. What's wrong with that? She really is pitiful. The two began to argue in front of me. It's my fault. I shouldn't have said anything. Blaming myself, I watched the unfolding drama.
I never thought Susie would be like this. I can't forgive you for saying that to my mom. We're calling off the engagement.
As the argument heated up, Kellen's declaration left Susie in shock. Wait, I have already told my parents and friends about our engagement. You can't just call it off. It seemed Susie had prematurely announced their engagement to everyone she knew. She approached Kellen, her face pale. I really love you, Kellen. I want to be with you. Watching her grovel was honestly nauseating, but this was too cruel. They had been doing well until now, and it seemed rash to end everything over a momentary disagreement. Maybe Susie could change, maybe she just lost her temper. Acting on fleeting emotion could have lasting consequences for Kellen's future. Kellen, why not forgive her? She's apologizing. I don't mind. I'm sure Lucien feels the same, right? Lucien nodded.
Yes.
It seemed he understood my perspective.
You know, aside of Susie we haven't seen, it might be too hasty to call off the engagement without considering all the good in her.
Hearing Lucien's words, Kellen pondered.
Maybe you're right.
In the end, Susie sincerely apologized for her behavior. Even after their engagement, Kellen seemed wary of Susie's attitude. He made it clear if she showed any disrespect towards us, he would reconsider their future together. Time passed. Kellen and his fiancée were making steady progress with their wedding preparation. Just recently, they sent out the invitations. Moreover, they decided to build a new home to start their married life in. Although it's still under construction, I have been invited by Kellen several times to check out the progress. Even though it's not finished yet, you can already tell it's going to be a beautiful house. The contractors have been very professional, and I couldn't help but feel proud thinking, that's my son for you. One day, Kellen invited Lucien and me to see the progress of their new home. Lucien in particular was very impressed. Every time he saw it, he would say, "What a great house!" I bet Kellen was pleased to see such reactions. Kellen enthusiastically showed Lucien the plans, explaining,
"This area will be like this."
Afterwards, we decided to grab some coffee. Kellen, Susie, Lucien, and I went to a nearby cafe. While sipping our coffee and discussing the wedding and new house, Susie suddenly blurted out, mother-in-law is getting a bit too comfortable. What do you mean? I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. And you think just because Kellen likes you, you can act this way? Isn't that just being arrogant? Why would you say that? Did I do something to upset you, Susie? Confused by her accusations, I asked her why she felt this way. She sighed heavily and said, Look, can you and father-in-law just not come to the wedding or the new house? You will just ruin the mood. If you don't like it, we can just divorce. What? I was taken aback by her words. Kellen, looking panicked, called out, Susie. But unlike before, she didn't apologize. Instead, she looked proud as if she had accomplished something. Why was she treating me this way? I thought she had changed her attitude, but it seems I was still an intruder in her eyes. Inside Susie, I remained a nuisance. But I'm not the type to just take this lying down. Susie needs to understand her place. After the cafe incident, Kellen was furious with Susie and considered breaking off the engagement, but I had a plan. I told him to go ahead with the wedding as planned, and if he wanted to break up, to do it later. You think you can handle this? Or do you just know you can't win against me? Susie smirked. I asked her again, so you really don't want us at the wedding? Yes, I would rather never see you or father-in-law again, Susie said with a smile. I warned her, are you sure about this, Susie? You might regret it. Why would I regret it? I get to have my wedding without any interruptions. I'm happy. Hearing her words, I just nodded. Kellen had told me he wanted us at the wedding, but if Susie felt this way, it might be best if we didn't attend. However, seeing Kellen's worried face, I whispered, I have a plan, and his expression darkened. I am not one to just sit back after being treated this way. In fact, I am the type who needs to get even, something Kellen and Lucien know all too well. Seeing our exchange, Lucy asked, what are you up to? But I just brushed it off. Nothing at all. We won't attend the wedding or visit your new home, so don't worry. I replied with a smile, and Susie said, that's a relief, and laughed. In Susie's mind, she probably envisioned a perfect wedding day. Who would make that dream come true for her after all she's done? Does she really think everything would go smoothly without any hitches? Is she living in a fantasy world? I had to hold back my laughter as I continued with the preparations for the wedding day. A few months later, the big day arrived. As promised, we didn't attend the ceremony. While relaxing at home, my phone suddenly rang as expected. It was Susie. Mother-in-law, please come to the venue right now. Hurry! Susie sounded frantic. I almost laughed, thinking I knew this would happen, but held back and asked what happened. Susie then began to explain the situation at the wedding venue. As she entered the venue excited about her big day, she greeted each guest. However, almost every guest asked, where's Clara? Each time she was asked, Susie would reply, she's busy. But every time she said that, the guests seemed disappointed, as if they were genuinely saddened by my absence. At first, Susie could handle it, but as more and more guests asked the same question, it became too much for her. Even her close friends asked, isn't Clara coming? Reaching her breaking point, Susie shattered a wine glass on the floor and shouted, why is no one paying attention to me, the bride? In her frustration, she even badmouthed me, saying, what's so great about that old lady? The atmosphere in the venue turned icy. Whispers began to circulate that Susie had intentionally not invited me. The mood of the wedding was ruined. Despite being the bride, Susie was met with cold stares. She felt uncomfortable as guests whispered about her. Please come and fix this. It's all because of you, mother-in-law. Susie's voice was filled with anger and blame. Who would want to go after being spoken to like that? If you're asking for a favor, shouldn't you ask nicely? Maybe apologize like you did before? Why should I do that for someone like you, mother-in-law? Hurry up. I'm about to change my dress. Do you want me to go back into that awful atmosphere? I'm the star today. She must have been really struggling with the mood at the venue. No matter what I said, all Susie could say was, come quickly. I couldn't help but chuckle at her desperation. Certainly being treated like an outcast on one's wedding day, a significant moment in life, must be tough. Feeling sorry for Susie, I promised to come to the venue. Relieved, Susie took a deep breath. Lucien and I dressed in our finest attire and headed to the venue mentioned in the invitation. I must admit, my son chose a wonderful place. The venue's interior was neither too lavish nor too simple, making it very comfortable. As we arrived in the waiting room, Susie approached, saying, you finally made it! Led by Susie into the hall, the moment the guests saw me, they flocked around. It's Clara, the real deal!
It's an honor to see you.
We thought we wouldn't see you today. Seeing the guests showering me with such admiration, Susie looked utterly bewildered. Why is everyone fussing over mother-in-law? I'm the bride today. One of the guests offered some advice, leaving Susie in shock. There is a reason I am so adored. I am the CEO of a major global corporate group. While Susie seemed unaware, I have been interviewed on TV and in magazines multiple times, making me quite famous domestically. Most guests probably attended the wedding more in hopes of seeing me than celebrating Susie's big day. Unaware of this, Susie's derogatory comments about me in front of the guests were about to backfire. That's not fair. Discovering my unexpected trump card, Susie collapsed in disbelief. Who's the real victim here? The wedding proceeded without further issue, but Kellen eventually broke off the engagement with Susie. Though Susie's attitude towards me changed, often calling me the best mother-in-law ever, it seemed she couldn't undo the discomfort she had caused. Susie was held responsible for the wedding expenses and the cost of the under-construction house. Rumors spread about Susie's terrible behavior towards me, leading her friends to distance themselves. Even her parents were outraged, making her home life unbearable. Meanwhile, I'm nearing retirement and have been preparing for my successor. Kellen, having gained experience and knowledge in a top-tier company, is the obvious choice. My family and employees are my cherished companions. I intend to protect and care for them as much as possible.